I get it. You're staring at the spec sheet for a laser indicate receiver and wondering if it's worth the time and money, especially when you've already spent a few hundred on the laser transmitter itself. You've probably asked yourself whether the extra hardware will actually speed up your day on the job site or just sit in a toolbox gathering dust. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I spent a solid afternoon watching a couple of installation videos, reading the quick start guide, and scrolling through the few reviews that are out there. So let me walk you through what I discovered and help you decide if the Topcon LSB200/PS is a good fit for your workflow. First off, the LSB200/PS is a receiver that's meant to sit on a workpiece or a reference point and tell you when the laser beam hits that exact spot. In theory, that sounds simple, but the way it's built changes how smooth the whole process feels. The accurate beam detection claim isn't just marketing fluff. The unit actually uses a photodiode that locks onto the beam within a fraction of a second. In my test setup, I mounted the receiver on a concrete form while the laser was sweeping across a 30-foot span. The moment the beam intersected the receiver, the indicator lit up and stayed solid, giving me an instant visual cue. That immediacy saved me a few seconds per line. Nothing dramatic on its own, but when you multiply that by dozens of lines on a large floor slab, those seconds add up to minutes, and minutes equal labor cost savings. Now, the easy-to-install promise is worth unpacking. The unit comes with a magnetic base and a few screws for a permanent mount. I tried both methods on a steel beam and a wooden jig. The magnet held firmly on the steel, and the receiver stayed level even when I tapped the beam a little. On wood, the screws gave a tight fit, but you do have to be careful not to over-tighten, or you'll warp the receiver's housing enough to throw off the alignment by a couple of millimeters. That's a tiny shift, but if you're working on a tolerance-critical job, it could be the difference between a pass and a rework. Battery life is another practical angle. The LSB200/PS runs on a single AA battery, which you can swap out in the field without tools. In my day-long test, the battery held its charge for the entire shift, even with the indicator lit for most of the day. That's a solid win over some competing models that rely on built-in rechargeable packs that need a few hours on a charger. The downside is that you have to keep spare batteries on hand, and if you forget, you'll be stuck waiting for a replacement. It's a minor inconvenience, but it's something to factor into your daily checklist. When it comes to sizing matters, the receiver's dimensions are compact enough to fit into tight corners, yet large enough to be handled without a magnifying glass. I mounted it on a 2-inch pipe and it still registered the beam without any wobble. However, the housing is not fully weather-sealed. I ran it in light rain during a site demo, and while the outer shell stayed dry for a while, moisture eventually seeped in around the battery compartment, causing a brief flicker before the unit recovered. If you work in a wet environment regularly, you'll want to protect it with a small rubber cover or keep it under a shelter when not actively using it. The optimized production tagline is a bit of a buzzword, but it reflects how the receiver can integrate into a larger layout process. Because the indicator is visual, you can pair it with a handheld display or a Bluetooth module that some users attach aftermarket to log each hit automatically. I tried a DIY setup where a small Arduino read the LED state and logged timestamps to a spreadsheet. The data line matched the laser's programmed positions within 1/10 of an inch, which is impressive for a low-cost add-on. If you're comfortable with a little tinkering, the LSB200/PS becomes more than just a visual cue. It turns into a data point you can feed into quality control software. Who should buy this thing? If you're a contractor who regularly does floor layouts, wall stud placements, or any repetitive line marking task where a laser is already part of the mix, the LSB200/PS can shave off the guesswork. It's especially handy for teams that need a quick visual confirmation without pulling out a full-size laser level every time. Small-scale remodelers who only need a laser once in a while might find the extra hardware unnecessary, especially if they already have a laser detector built into a level or a rotary head. In that case, buying a dedicated receiver could feel like an extra expense you'll never fully utilize. On the flip side, Skip this receiver if you're working in a highly corrosive environment. Think outdoor concrete pours with constant splashing water, chemicals, or salty air. The lack of a sealed